So let's look a little closer at something you know, or type 1 authentication, or knowledge-based authentication. I say I'm Thor for identification. I use my knowledge-based factor. Could be a password. Since I know the password that Thor has, I must be Thor. Knowledge-based authentication is by far the most commonly used type of authentication. And passwords are by far the most commonly used of those. It is also by far the weakest type of authentication. It can very easily be compromised. So somewhere in late 2017, a text message was sent out in Hawaii saying a nuclear missile was incoming. And luckily it was false. But afterward they did interviews with journalists. They invited into their offices, and you can see on the monitors there were little sticky notes with all their passwords. That's just a very, very horrible idea. So many of the attacks we looked at are focused on passwords because they are so easy to break compared to other types of authentication. A lot of times we use those little secret questions. Where were you born? Which high school did you go to unlock accounts? I was able to hack Sarah Palin, who's the running mate of Mitt Romney in the 2008 presidential election. Her security questions were very simple. Which high school did you go to? What's your birthday? What's the name of your first child? I mean, all that stuff you can find online. The hacker then reset her account and gained access to it. And even if you're someone not in the public eye, a lot of us just put that on Facebook. Here's my birthday. Here's the high school I went to. Here's the name of all my children and my mother's maiden name. Don't make yourself a target. It is always much easier to steal the password than it is to break the encryption. I'm going to assume our passwords are hashed. We'll use salting. We'll have all the appropriate countermeasures in place, and hopefully we've trained our employees to not do what missile defense did in Hawaii and not have their password under their keyboard or taped to their monitor. We do obviously also have good password rules. They should all have a minimum length. They should all have an uppercase, lowercase, numbers, symbols, and they should not contain full words or other phrases that are easy to guess. And no, summer 2017 is not a good password. Especially not if the previous one was spring 2017. Then our passwords should have an expiration date, and we have a reuse policy where users can reuse the last 12 or 24 passwords. And we also have a minimum age on passwords. So you can't change your password again after you changed it for another 3 or 5 or 10 days. Otherwise, Bob will change his password 24 times so he can get summer 2017 as his password again. And we never allow people to put things in passwords that are full words. Pets, children, family members, significant other, anniversaries, birthdays, birthplace, favorite holiday, or your sports team. They cannot be used in your password. And we have talked about key stretching before. It is part of our layered defense, where whenever I try to log into a system, it adds another half a second, 2 seconds to each login, effectively making brute force an ineffective attack vector, because they need to try millions of times probably. And millions times 2 seconds is way too long. They'll find some other way to attack us. So to fight brute force attacks, we can limit the number of times people can try to log in. And brute force uses the entire key space. Every possible combination on a keyboard will use, sometimes in order, sometimes not, depending on if they have any information about our passwords. Given enough time, any password will be broken. But if that time is 300 years, it doesn't really matter. And it is effective against all key-based ciphers, except maybe the one-time pad. It would technically in the end decrypt it, but it would also have so many false positives, you would have no clue which one was the right one. So it can be broken, but it doesn't really do anything. Then we have dictionary attacks. And this is exactly why we don't allow our employees to use passwords that contain dictionary words. Again, winter 2017. No. If an attacker knows the user uses dictionary words with a number at the end, you don't need to brute force anything anymore. They just have a precompiled list and try to break your password with that. And then rainbow tables. I've seen some that are huge. Millions and millions of passwords and hashed values compared to them. One side you have the password, the other side you have the hash. They use those if they are able to steal one of our hashed passwords. Then they compare what they stole to their list, and if our password matches any of those millions of passwords, they know what our password is. So against that, we obviously also limit the number of logins. We use the salting we talked about earlier. The random characters are added, so the hash value is different than it would have been if it was just the password. Attackers can also use key locking, which is used to, well, lock your keys. Every single keystroke you make on the keyboard is logged, and that can either be a hardware or a software keylogger. A hardware keylogger would obviously in most cases be much more difficult to get in place because they need physical access to your laptop or your workstation. A lot of times it looks like the little dongle over here on the right. Unplug your keyboard, plug that thing in, plug your keyboard into it, and then it records everything. And they can either have a call home feature where they send your data, or at some point they just swing by again and pick it up and you will never know. More commonly used today though are software keyloggers, which is just a little program installed on your computer. It's often done by compromising your computer with a Trojan, where the payload is either the keylogger or a backdoor. And then the keylogger will call home every so often with your information or just upload to a server at regular intervals. You may never know. And this was the salting I was talking about. We add random data as additional input to our one-way hash function of our passwords or our passphrases. Remember how the entire hash changed when I changed the comma in the Charles Dickens Great Expectations? Same thing with a password. And this is one of our primary defenses against dictionary attacks and precompiled rainbow tables. And they are very similar to nonces. Where salting is random data, nonces is, well, number ones. It's only numbers. So we add a number or a pseudo-random number to our authentication protocols to make sure that old communication cannot be used in replay attacks. And we also use it as an initialization vector on our cryptographic hash functions. Clipping levels is when you mistype your password, you get a couple extra tries because all of us have fat fingers on Mondays. But very important to remember for the certification, we use clipping levels to prevent administrative overhead. And we can use a lot of variations of it. After 3 wrong login attempts, your account is locked for an hour. Then you get another 3 tries. Next time it might be locked for 5 hours, or you need an admin to unlock it. Or you have some smart backend system where you can type in secret questions, some of the knowledge-based factors you have, and you can unlock the account yourself. But then there is an insane amount of information about all of us out there in the public domain. So if we do implement something like this, it should at least only be within our own organization. And maybe contact users when they try to use it. I mean, I have been that guy that the same user will call 2 or 3 times a week because she or he forgot his password. And yes, those are the people that write it down on a post-it note. In those cases, I'm not really sure what the right answer is. Alright, back to the curriculum. So to authenticate fast, a lot of our systems have the hashed values of our passwords stored on them. If we're not using salting and an attacker gets one of those passwords, this is where they can use their rainbow tables and see if they can find a matching hash value for our password. And obviously, we never ever store passwords anywhere in plain text. And we shouldn't even store plain hashed values either. We need that salting because attackers very often are smart people. They will find the weakest link in our chain and exploit that. And it is often the users, which we can do something about with the training, but we can definitely do something about our systems. These are the official recommendations by the US DoD and Microsoft. The system should remember the last 24 passwords. A password should not be over 90 days. At 90 days, it expires. We should have a minimum passwords age of 2 days. This prevents Bob from changing his password 24 times to get back to the old one. Passwords should at minimum be 8 characters. Passwords should meet complex requirements equals true. This is the uppercase, lowercase, number, symbol, and then passwords should not use reversible encryption. Remember, hashing is a one-way function. It's not reversible, whereas asymmetric and symmetric encryption is.